Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Hi, Ella. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm in my getting to be late 60s at this point. Right now, I'm living in Germany. This is, I think, the fourth time I've lived in Germany, third time I've lived in Stuttgart.
Ooh, I've been there.
I really like it here, but I like my boat better. So before that, we were living on the boat after my husband retired for 4 years, and then he got bored. So he wanted to apply for his old job over here again. So before he went on the boat, I bought a house in the Virgin Islands, and he was living in Virginia, Southern Virginia, and Southern Virginia and I don't get along. So
we're in the Virgin Islands.
Well, we had friends there and we liked it, and we thought we would be able to have the boat and have that house too, but it didn't work out that way. So we kept the boat and sold the house.
So which island?
St. Thomas.
Ooh, I like it. I am from Puerto Rico. So I've been to St. Thomas a few times. My stepdad fixes boats, so he hates traveling St. Thomas very so often because he specializes, he's well known in the island for boats. Often he has to travel St. Thomas and he hates it. I've been there a couple of times and it's just fun. It's a fun, cute little island.
Yeah, I lived about 5 minutes drive from Megan's. Mm-hmm. So I was there all the time. I used to paddleboard a lot. And walk the beach and walk Peterburg Hill and that kind of stuff. So,
oh, that's awesome. So let's talk about your romance journey. Were you always a romance reader, or did you start writing romance and then you just discovered the genre?
No, I have been reading romance since about 1970.
Oh my gosh!
Actually, probably before that, because I think I read my first Jane Austen books when I was in 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So, I graduated from high school in 71. So it was before I graduated from high school. And I've always read them. I read wider than I do now because writing takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I actually work more hours than I did when I was a lawyer. But so I've always read historical romance. I used to also read a lot of military suspense and spy stuff and that kind of thing too. Some science fiction. I read the Dune series, of course, and The Hobbit and all that other kind of stuff.
Oh, that's so awesome. So what inspired you to become an author?
I was a lawyer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And, for 20 years, and I'd gotten really tired of it. I was practicing for the last several years. I was practicing family law, and you really kind of burn out. So I looked at other areas of the law, but they didn't grab me. And so I decided I would write about our 5-year plan to buying the boat. Mm-hmm. I was already in the Virgin Islands at that time, and we had kind of instituted the 5-year plan. But I found out I couldn't write about myself at all. Nothing about my life. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden I think I was just sitting there at the computer one day, and I had a video playing in my head of this angry Regency lady. Mm-hmm. And I wrote several paragraphs, had no idea what I was doing. And she introduced herself to me. I found out who the guy she didn't like, who she ended up marrying. And everything just started coming out. And my husband was down, and I looked at him and I said, I think I'm going to write a Regency romance. He said, well, you could do that. So I did. And a month later, I had a completed manuscript.
Oh my gosh.
It was 100,000 words. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
But, I blame this on my master's, because I have a master's in international relations and government. And so I used to pump out 100-page papers all the time. So I just kind of used those skills.
Those are transferable skills.
There are skills you can use from other areas of your life.
So what was the research process like writing Regency?
Well, I've been reading Regencies for years. I've read Sergeant Hire several times, right?
Yeah.
And I also read earlier books. I read all the Dorothy Dunnets. And I've read, I was kind of maybe stuck on that because I really didn't know of any new authors. I lived remotely for a long time, either in Europe or in the islands. We had no bookstore there. Of course, I have no bookstores in Europe that are in English, really, except for one in Paris, Shakespeare and Company. But they don't carry romance, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh.
So basically, by that time it was, said I'm 67, so it was 9 years ago, and the Google machine had been invented. And so when I had something to look up, I would go there. And so I did a lot of research that way. And then I joined RWA. I had joined a CompuServe Writers Forum because our first email was CompuServe years and years ago. And we just kept CompuServe. And so it would come up on the sidebar, and I decided I would join that. And then I learned about some other research tips. And then someone said, am I going to the Romance Writers of America? Well, first they said RWA. And I said, what's that? They said, Romance Writers of America. And I said, are you going to the conference? I said, I don't know. I've never heard of it. So I Googled that, joined RWA. The conference was in New York that year, and I was too late to go. But I already had this manuscript. And then Brendan Novak had her, you might remember her auction that she used to do every year for diabetes.
Yeah.
And so I bid on an editor.
Oh.
And I sent my manuscript to an editor, and she said she didn't really rep my genre. She didn't rep romance. But because she rejected me, I got to join what was PAN at the time. Everything's kind of been watered down, I think, but it was a big thing to have to join PAN because you had to have a finished manuscript. You had to have been rejected by an author, by an editor or a publicist or something. And so I kind of jumped right into the secondary level of RWA. And I found out about the Beaumont. And so my research world opened up. So now I have a subscription to the Oxford English Dictionary online, and I basically look up almost every word that I don't know for a fact was used at that time in that context.
Yes. I read your author's notes, and I was like, I was fascinating about the wording. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I do have a British beta reader who catches out my Americanism. So
I love that.
Yeah, but that's how kind of I did it. And so I kind of research as I go along because I'm a pantser. I don't plot. I have an idea of where the book's going, but I don't plot. So I research as I go along. So this past week, it's been horses. Because my horses kind of change depending on the people, and you have to research everything. In the book, the first book of Lords of London, I had to research cows. So everything that you read about the cows is true, basically.
I love this. I love this.
I tried to read about history of certain cows coming from Netherlands into England and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I feel like it's like I would like writing historical romance would be like going down the rabbit hole, like looking at one little thing and be like, let me think about it, let me explore it, let me go on Google, let me search newspapers, let me figure out like the whole thing,
It could be. And I will tell you that when I was working on my undergraduate degree, you used to sit in the stacks. This is before computers.
Yeah.
And you could get, and strangely enough, they would have political science and government books next to James Joyce.
Oh.
and you can really go down a rabbit hole that way.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So you're sitting in the stacks and just start reading James Joyce.
Oh my God.
I was dating my husband at the time, and he was deployed. He was in the Army. And I'd been in the Army. Friends had introduced us. And I was writing him letters based on James Joyce.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I got pretty racy. But so yeah, I'm much more specific now. When I get to a point in the book that I have to research something, I research just that thing.
Okay. I like it.
Otherwise, you could spend days researching and very little time writing the book.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what has it been like to write it during the pandemic? I'm asking this question. It's a timely question because we're all different levels of shutdown, different levels of distraction, anxiety, and all the different things. What's been the process for you?
Well, of course, I've lived remotely.
Yeah.
So when you're on a boat, you don't, you're making a passage, you may not see anybody else but your husband for, 3 weeks, 2, 3 weeks, sometimes a month, depending on where you're going.
Yeah.
So it kind of hasn't changed that much for me, except that I usually have lunch with a friend on Friday. No matter where I am. I did the same thing when I was in the Virgin Islands. I had a friend I would have lunch with on Fridays. And when I got back to Stuttgart, I got back on a Wednesday, and on Friday, I was having lunch with the same friend I'd had lunch with for years on Friday. So you don't get to see people. So I don't have that kind of outlet. And of course, I really, we shut down pretty early here. Everything shut down, and it shut down again. So I can't like go downtown, have a glass of wine, do a little shopping, that kind of stuff. But the biggest problem was my husband was home for 3 months. And on the boat, I would tell him to go someplace. He couldn't leave me alone. And I couldn't do that because everything was shut down.
Yeah.
So he had to try to leave me alone. I literally slammed the door in his face at one point.
Oh my gosh.
Because he wouldn't. I told him, I'm on a deadline. I've got to get this book in. Do not bother me. And he read, I don't know, was looking at something. I have no clue what it could, I don't remember what it was now, and came into my office and started to yell. And he's 6'4" and I'm 5'2", right? And he was right in the door. He'd opened it and didn't walk in the room. And I looked at him and I said, I told you to leave me alone. And I literally slammed the door in his face. So that was the worst thing. After that, he got a lot better.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know.
It's quite something. So
there's just some lines you don't cross.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never bother him if we're doing a work thing,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. So I think sometimes you just have to take a hard stand and enforce what you say.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So let's talk about the Most Eligible Viscount of London. So this is part of the series. This is book 2, but it can be read as standalone. What was the source of inspiration of the series and this book in particular?
Well, the characters are a combination of The Marriage Game, which is my first series, and The Worthingtons, which is my second series. My books are very character driven. So you could give me, for example, the same plot, and it would come out entirely different based on the characters. And so it was the characters. The actual first book in the series is the last book in the Marriage Game series. That was, it was weird because I said I would do another book for them, and they decided to take this one. So instead of doing 4 books in Lords of London, we did 3 books in Lords of London, and did Dorian Alex's book, the last one. And so this was kind of a continuation on, and it was also continuation on from Believe in Me, which was the last book I'd written in the Marriage Game. I'm starting the Marriage Game again. The one I'm writing right now is the next book. And so we had 5 female friends, and that's all their stories. And then we have male characters that were characters in other books, secondary characters in other books. They kind of came forward, and they started matching each other up. So that's kind of how the whole thing happened.
I love this. So how do you keep straight your world? Like, because they all live in the same world,
It's always, well, this time I've got a 2-page single space character list.
Okay.
including that I did for this book I'm writing now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go back to the other books because I made the really big mistake of not hiring someone to do a series Bible.
Yeah.
So I have to go. Fortunately, I keep detailed character lists now.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep a list of sisters and brothers of my characters,
Mm-hmm.
and now babies of my characters. So I've got a bunch of 5-year-olds running around. And that, so I have to go back sometimes and check on ages and age them appropriately, depending on when their older brother or sister first came into their own book.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, for example, in Dory's book, I can't remember the name of that. She was Huntley's sister. And then the Marquis of Exeter was originally, before his fathers died, he had another title. And so he was in another book. And so they ended up coming together. But Huntley is in Desiring Lady Caro of the Marriage Game.
Mm-hmm.
So they always kind of mention their brothers and sisters. And so I write that down. And the Marquis she's been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of were wondering where Dory came in, that's where Dory came in. And that's where she and Alex got married. Because they all kind of show up in the other Lords of London books. So the Most Eligible Viscount in London, Gavin Turley is the sister of now Elizabeth Carrington, who they are at the embassy in London, she and her husband. And so he was in that book, he was in another book. And so he ended up being perfect for Adeline.
Mm-hmm.
Not Adeline, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Never mind. Adeline was the first one.
Yeah.
Georgiana. And Georgie's sister Meg was what had been the last book in the Marriage Game, Miss Featherton's Christmas Prince, which spawned a novella series that I do for box sets, the Trevors. So, and then her brother was in the book Kisses for Lady Mary. So she was the next in line. And then, so they both have been, she hadn't been visible before, but she'd been talked about before, and Gavin had been visible before.
Gotcha.
So in the next book that comes out next year, The Most Eligible Bride in Town, Henrietta is sister of the former Dottie Stern, now the Marchioness of Merton, who was in when a Marquis Chooses a Bride, which is the second book of the Worthingtons. So, and then I get back into the twins and Madeline, who I'm doing the books on now, part of the Worthington family. And Fatherby was the one that kidnapped Dottie. So I had a really good conflict there. And actually, I thought of him because one of my readers said, when are you going to rehabilitate Fatherby? And I went, oh, that's a good idea. So I had to go back and figure out what was happening with him. So, yeah.
I love this. I love, we can start any place, but we have a series of worlds to venture on. And as someone who loves series, this is like, you just spoke my language.
So we have a lot of people in this next book of the Worthingtons, and we don't have a title for it yet, but it's Lady Eleanor Carpenter's book. And so we've got everybody there because we've got sisters from the Marriage Game characters that are coming out. We've got a sister from the Lords of London characters that is coming out. And we've got the twins and Madeline, who are all in the Worthington family. So they will eventually, of course, the first 3 will be Worthington books, and then we'll probably do another breakout trilogy.
I love this.
For the next ones.
Oh my gosh, you have work to do.
I have lots of work to do. But I think that the thing is you can kind of, the Marriage Game books, I think were a little bit easier because people knew each other, but they weren't related. When you get a family, I think readers can get a little tired
Mm-hmm.
So doing these breakout series gives me an opportunity to give the secondary characters their stories,
Mm-hmm.
and gives everybody kind of a break, and then we go back again. Plus, I have a hard time aging people so rapidly.
Yeah.
So without the Lords of London, I would have had to age the twins and Madeline 6 years.
Oh my gosh.
And I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But in these stories, you get to see a little bit of them, and you get to see them from being kind of silly girls to being young ladies of 18 who still have questions, but are starting to come into their own.
Okay. Oh, I love this. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. So you mentioned you probably writing more than reading, but have you read any book over the past few years that you can't stop gushing about, that you're like, this is a good book to share?
The ones I really gush about, I read years ago, but there was one, when you asked this, it's a Carolyn Linden book. And I didn't discover all these people until after I started writing. And I think had I discovered them before then, I wouldn't have started writing, which is weird. So Loretta Chase's Duke in Shining Armor. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
But where's the Carolyn Linden one? I'm looking at my Kindle. I like Patricia Rice's historicals a lot. They're older books. I just discovered May McGoldrick. I was in a box set with her, and I started reading her books. I also just discovered Lindsay Sands.
Yes. Oh my God.
And I love her Scottish books.
Yes. Well, I've been reading her paranormal series, and it's like light rom-com with vampires. Like, they're not that heavy on the world building, but they're just funny. So I really like her world. Like, it's just like, it's fun. It's a fun book to read.
Oh yeah, Sabrina Jeffries I like a lot. But I've been binge reading authors that I haven't read before. I'm still catching up. I mean, I hadn't heard of Stephanie Lawrence when I started writing. I think I may have heard of only her. I didn't know. I was surprised, happily surprised, that she was writing Regencies with sex in them.
Yes. Oh, and they're heavy sex scenes.
They are, yeah. So Devil's Bride is one of my favorites, and there's some others in that. Jennifer Haymore is another favorite.
Yeah.
She and I are both sailors.
Ooh.
I'm looking for this book and I can't find it. I just had it. Where was it? Elizabeth Hoyt, I adore. And I adore her too. I like Madeline Hunter a lot, and I like Madeline as well.
Yeah.
So it's great to get to be friends. Vanessa Kelly's another one I read.
Yeah.
These are auto buys for me.
Yeah.
Lisa Kleypas, which I hadn't read until about a year or so ago, and I had to catch up.
Oh my God. Yeah. Lisa's like, yeah. I share like Lisa's like my friend, but I've been reading her backlist and I just adore it. So
yeah. Elizabeth Boyle, Lorraine Heath, I love. Where is this one? Carolyn Linden writes the best love scenes I have ever read. And I love all of her books, but this one that came out this past year, and I can't find it. It was the last one she had out.
Is it about a rogue?
Yes.
Yep.
I really like that book.
Yeah.
But I read Georgette Hare for years, so I think my two favorites are The Grand Sophie and Venetia. I really honestly believe that had she been writing currently, she would have sex in her books. It was just the way she wrote, especially Venetia. Yeah. So I really thought she would. And then, of course, Dorothy Dennett, who wrote Medievals, basically. Elizabethan, and then the next series was Medievals. Nicola Cornick, I love her historicals. I don't read anybody's contemporaries. And I think it's because I practice family law. My kind of my theory, I don't get the conflicts.
Yeah.
It's like if he's giving you this much trouble, kick him to the curb. You don't have to go through it. You don't have to go through it.
I understand. Yeah, I actually, so for me, contemporaries work, but I cannot deal with like angsty books or toxic relationships or those who like they put you through a ringer. Like for me, it's like no, like just kick him to the curb, you know?
Yeah, no,
the right place.
And at least if I have a relationship that normally they wouldn't marry, when I'm writing a Regency, I can make it so they have to marry.
Yeah.
Because there were so many times if you got caught, you had to get married.
Yeah.
And then you had to work it out.
Yeah.
You know, so and so and sometimes even your family can't save you from getting married, but they can be there, they can have your back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the fun part with me with Regencies. There are so many rules.
Yes, there are. I love this. And thank you for the recommendations. Like as someone who's like new to historicals, I'm like, I got like quite a few backlists to check out.
I may have been going too fast. I can email them if you want me to. But yeah, I really, and Julia Quinn, which I never even heard of her when I picked my great grandmother's name as my pen name. So this tells you how far how out of these things I was when I started writing.
Oh my gosh.
I know, I'd never heard of any of these people. It was crazy.
I love that.
Who was it? She's dead now, unfortunately. Neville was Miranda Neville. Fantastic books. And Barbara Monahan, also really, really good. She used to write for Harlequin and they ended the line. So now she's self-pubbing. She has a little bit of magic in her books. Ooh. And as long as it's a little bit, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
So she's written some very, very good books. So yeah, there are just a lot of really good authors out there.
I love this.
But my biggest hang up is they have to be pretty historically accurate.
Yep.
Otherwise, I just lose it. But I'm the same with that anything. I was in the Army twice. I was a lawyer. You know, I anything kind of like that. I mean, my husband would not take me to lawyer movies anymore because at one point I stood up and I went, objection.
Oh my gosh.
In the movie theater. He said, sit down.
Oh my gosh.
Pulled me down. And then I'm going, redirect. He's going, that's it. I'm not doing this with you anymore.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny.
So, yeah. So naturally, if I'm writing Regencies, I would be the same way about Regencies.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. So tell us where we can find you online.
My website is ellaquinnauthor.com. And my books can be bought anywhere, all over the ebook platforms and at any bookstore, except a lot of indie bookstores don't carry historicals. So you have to kind of suss out.
You just have to ask them to order for you because
okay, well, yeah. So anyhow, I am all over the place. I'm in print and in paperback. Yep. And in ebook for all my books. The Marriage Game books are coming out one a year in paperback. So I had The Secret Life of Miss Anna Marsh came out in the last fall. And then The Seduction of Lady Phoebe was the first book I ever wrote and my first book published. So I had a very, very fast publishing journey.
I love this.
So I was 8 months after I started writing, I had a really good agent. 8 months after that, I had my first 3-book contract.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's fast. I had Barbara Rogan, who has been everything, I think. She's been editor and agent. She's a bestseller author. Told me when I first started, it would take 5 years. And I thought, I'm 58. I don't have 5 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I said I wanted to be published by the time I was 60. And a month before I turned 60, Phoebe came out.
Ooh.
So that was great timing.
That is great.
Yeah, it was great. And I just never stopped.
I love this. And you have worlds that you're building and letting us as readers dive into them. So
Yeah, and in my Worthingtons group for my readers, they get to do things like pick horse names, cat names. You know, sometimes they get to pick a baby name, and they always get put in the books in the acknowledgement parts, and then I usually give them a book when I do that. So whoever wins that thing, but we do that on a pretty regular basis over Christmas. We did the 12 days of Christmas, and I gave away something, reader's choice of a list of gifts that they wanted. So everything from dog gifts to blankets and tea for one sets, as well as books.
I love this so much.
Awesome. So we had 12 days of that.
That's amazing. So thank you, Ella, for being on the show.
Well, thank you so much for asking me, and I'm so glad that you invited me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For book recommendations, author interview archives, and other fun book resources and tips, please visit WhatchReNextBlog.com. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Network. To discover new shows to listen and love, please visit frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.